Careful, sweetheart. That rifle costs more than your truck. The laughter rolled through the armory before the sentence had even finished. A few soldiers slapped the workbench. Others shook their heads and smirked as if they had just witnessed the funniest thing on base. The man who had spoken stood with his arms crossed, clearly pleased with himself. Staff Sergeant Ryan Cole had a reputation for being one of the best marksmen at Falcon Ridge Training Center, and he carried that reputation everywhere he went. Across from him, a woman sat quietly at a maintenance table beneath the bright fluorescent lights. Olivia Hayes didn't look up. She didn't argue. She didn't even acknowledge the joke. Her attention remained fixed on the rifle resting in front of her. The weapon had been partially disassembled with every component arranged in neat rows across the table. Her gloved fingers moved carefully over the metal surfaces, wiping away dust that nobody else seemed to notice. The armory itself was alive with noise. Soldiers prepared equipment for the upcoming training cycle. Conversations bounced off concrete walls. Toolboxes opened and closed. Somewhere in the distance, an air compressor hissed to life. Yet despite all the distractions, Olivia seemed completely unaffected. "You hear me?" Ryan called. "Or are you pretending to know what you're doing?" More laughter followed. A younger soldier stepped closer and peered over her shoulder. "I heard she transferred in 2 days ago." "That right?" another replied. "Maybe she's trying to impress somebody." Olivia continued cleaning the rifle. She inspected the bolt assembly with calm precision before setting it down exactly where it belonged. Not a single movement appeared rushed. Not a single motion appeared uncertain. That only seemed to amuse the crowd even more. People often expected confidence to be loud. Olivia's confidence was silent. Unfortunately, silence was something many people misunderstood. Outside the armory windows, the Nevada morning sun was beginning to climb over the desert mountains. Heat shimmered above the distant training ranges. Another day of drills awaited the personnel stationed at Falcon Ridge, one of the military's most demanding long-range marksmanship facilities. Every soldier there respected skill. They admired results. But first impressions often spoke louder than records nobody had seen. Olivia was 32 years old, though most guessed she was younger. Her plain uniform carried no decorations that stood out. Her hair was tied neatly beneath her cap. Nothing about her appearance suggested she deserved special attention. And that was exactly how she preferred it. "I'll give her credit," one soldier joked. "At least she's brave enough to touch the thing." The group laughed again. Ryan shook his head. Touching it and knowing how to use it are two different things. For the first time, Olivia finally looked up. Her blue eyes met his for only a second. There was no anger there. No embarrassment. No challenge. Just a calm expression that somehow made Ryan stop talking for a moment. Then she returned to her work as if the interruption had never happened. Across the room, standing near a rack of training gear, Commander Nathan Brooks watched everything unfold. Unlike the others, he wasn't smiling. He simply observed in silence, his attention moving from Ryan to Olivia and back again. The soldiers around him failed to notice the faint expression crossing his face. It wasn't amusement. It wasn't concern. It looked much more like recognition. And if anyone had bothered to look closely, they might have realized something important. Commander Brooks already knew exactly who Olivia Hayes was. The rest of the base was about to find out. The morning moved on, but the conversation inside the armory did not. By the time Olivia Hayes finished reassembling the rifle, word had already spread across Falcon Ridge Training Center. New transfer. Quiet woman. Thinks she can handle a precision rifle. Every version of the story became a little more exaggerated as it traveled from building to building. Olivia seemed completely unaware of it. She signed the maintenance log, returned the rifle to its rack, and stepped outside into the bright Nevada sunlight. The dry desert air carried the smell of dust and engine exhaust across the base. Training vehicles rolled along distant roads while instructors prepared the day's exercises. Olivia walked alone toward the administration building with the same calm pace she carried everywhere. Behind her, Ryan Cole leaned against the armory doorway, watching her leave. "I still do not understand why Commander Brooks keeps her around," one soldier said. Ryan shrugged. "Maybe she is good at paperwork." A few nearby soldiers laughed. Another shook his head. "No chance." "Did you see the way she handled that rifle?" Ryan smirked. "Cleaning a rifle is not the same as shooting one." The conversation continued long after Olivia disappeared around the corner. What nobody realized was that she could hear more than people expected. Years of experience had taught her to recognize every tone in a person's voice. Confidence. Doubt. Arrogance. Fear. She had encountered them all before. At the administration building, she received her training schedule for the week. The packet contained range assignments, qualification requirements, and evaluation standards. Olivia glanced through the pages only once before slipping them into a folder. Most soldiers spent hours studying those schedules. Olivia already knew exactly what every event would require. As she stepped back outside, she noticed Commander Nathan Brooks standing beneath the shade of a metal awning. He appeared to be reviewing documents, but his eyes lifted the moment she approached. "Settling in?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "Any problems so far?" Olivia paused for a moment. "No, sir." Nathan studied her expression carefully. Most people would have complained about the jokes. Most people would have defended themselves. Olivia did neither. That answer seemed to satisfy him. "Good," he said. "Tomorrow's evaluation range will be interesting." For the first time, the corner of Olivia's mouth lifted slightly. "I imagine it will be." Nathan nodded and returned to his paperwork. Olivia continued walking. Neither of them noticed that a pair of soldiers nearby had overheard the exchange. Within an hour, rumors began spreading again. Commander Brooks had spoken to her personally. Some assumed she had connections. Others assumed she had received special treatment. Nobody guessed the truth. Later that afternoon, a notice appeared on every training board across Falcon Ridge. Long-range marksmanship evaluation. All qualified personnel report at 0700 hours. The announcement immediately became the center of discussion throughout the base. Soldiers gathered around the boards reading every detail. Ryan Cole smiled when he saw it. He had been waiting months for another opportunity to prove he was the best shot on base. Then he noticed a name near the bottom of the participant roster. Olivia Hayes. His smile widened. "This should be entertaining," he said quietly. The next morning arrived with clear skies stretching across the Nevada desert. By 6:30, Falcon Ridge was already awake. Trucks moved between training areas, instructors reviewed checklists, and groups of soldiers headed toward the long-range evaluation range carrying equipment cases and notebooks. The event only happened a few times each year, and everyone knew it carried weight. Strong performances opened doors. Poor performances closed them. By 7 o'clock, the observation area overlooking the range was crowded. Ryan Cole stood near the front with several soldiers from his unit. He looked completely at ease. If anything, he seemed excited. "I am calling it now," he announced loudly enough for half the crowd to hear. "Nobody is beating my score today." A few soldiers laughed and nodded. One of them pointed toward the parking area where participants were arriving. "What about your new competition?" Ryan followed the gesture and spotted Olivia Hayes walking toward the range carrying a rifle case. She moved with the same calm pace she always seemed to have. No dramatic entrance. No attempt to draw attention. Ryan grinned. "If she hits one target today, I will buy dinner for the entire base." The statement immediately triggered laughter from the surrounding soldiers. Someone shouted that they wanted steak. Another requested barbecue. Within seconds, people were joking about the free meal they expected Ryan to owe. Olivia passed within hearing distance but showed no reaction. She simply continued toward the registration table. Not even offended, one soldier remarked. Maybe she does not understand the joke. Ryan shook his head. Trust me. She understands. Near the firing line, instructors organized competitors into groups. Clipboards changed hands. Safety briefings began. Wind conditions were posted on a large board near the observation deck. Gusts were expected to increase throughout the morning, making the evaluation more difficult with every passing hour. The challenge would test far more than simple accuracy. It would reward patience, discipline, and judgment. Commander Nathan Brooks arrived a few minutes later. Unlike most spectators, he positioned himself away from the crowd. From there he could see the entire range. More importantly, he could observe the competitors without becoming part of the conversation surrounding them. As names were called, participants stepped forward one by one to confirm attendance. Ryan answered with visible confidence. Several soldiers applauded when his name was announced. Then the instructor reached the final section of the roster. Olivia Hayes. The range suddenly became quieter. Not silent, but noticeably different. Curious eyes followed her as she stepped forward. The instructor checked her paperwork and nodded. You are confirmed. Olivia thanked him and moved toward the preparation area. The whispers immediately resumed. Some people questioned why she had entered. Others speculated that she simply wanted experience. A few expected her to withdraw before the event started. None of them noticed Nathan Brooks watching from across the range. The commander folded his arms and looked toward the distant targets shimmering beneath the desert sun. A faint smile appeared for only a moment before disappearing again. Unlike everyone else, he was not wondering whether Olivia belonged there. He was wondering how long it would take before the rest of Falcon Ridge realized exactly who they had been laughing at. The safety briefing ended, and the competitors moved into their assigned positions along the firing line. The desert sun continued climbing higher, and the wind that had been little more than a gentle breeze earlier in the morning was beginning to shift unpredictably across the range. Experienced shooters noticed it immediately. The flags placed at different distances no longer moved in the same direction. Conditions were becoming complicated. The instructors seemed pleased. Difficult conditions revealed who truly understood the fundamentals. Ryan Cole checked his equipment with visible confidence. Several soldiers gathered nearby, eager to watch the man many considered the best marksman at Falcon Ridge. Every movement he made attracted attention. Every adjustment seemed to reinforce his reputation. Meanwhile, Olivia Hayes sat quietly at a preparation table farther down the line. She reviewed her rifle, checked each component once, and then closed the case. Unlike most competitors, she did not continue making adjustments. She simply sat and watched the range. A younger soldier noticed and laughed softly. She looks more relaxed than anyone here. Another shook his head. That is because she does not know how hard this evaluation is going to be. The assumption spread quickly through the spectators. People often mistook calmness for inexperience. Olivia had encountered that mistake throughout most of her career. Near the observation area, Commander Nathan Brooks remained silent. He listened as soldiers discussed probabilities, rankings, and predictions. Nearly every conversation centered around Ryan. Almost nobody mentioned Olivia except as a source of amusement. Nathan found that interesting. Human nature rarely changed. People tended to notice confidence before competence. An instructor stepped forward and addressed the competitors. Listen carefully. Targets will be placed at multiple distances. Scores will be based on consistency, precision, and judgment. Conditions will change throughout the event. Adapt accordingly. The competitors nodded. Everyone understood what that meant. The evaluation was designed to challenge decision-making as much as shooting ability. Minutes later, participants received their final assignments. Ryan glanced at his sheet and smiled. Perfect. One of the soldiers standing nearby asked why. Because this range favors experience, Ryan replied. Some people are about to learn the difference between cleaning a rifle and actually using one. Several spectators laughed. The comment traveled quickly through the crowd until even people who had not heard it directly were repeating it. Olivia happened to be walking toward her assigned station when the remark reached her. She showed no reaction whatsoever. No change in expression. No response. She simply continued moving. That seemed to frustrate Ryan more than any argument could have. Across the firing line, competitors settled into position. The atmosphere shifted noticeably. Conversations became quieter. Jokes faded away. The evaluation was about to begin. Even spectators sensed the importance of the moment. An air horn sounded in the distance, signaling the official start of the event. One by one, participants prepared for their first attempts. Ryan adjusted his shooting position and looked completely at home. Olivia settled into her lane with the same quiet composure she had displayed since arriving at Falcon Ridge. From the observation area, Nathan Brooks watched both of them carefully. He knew everyone expected Ryan to dominate the competition. What nobody realized was that the real story of the day had not even begun yet. The first rotation began under increasingly difficult conditions. Heat waves shimmered above the desert floor, creating subtle distortions that challenged even experienced competitors. One after another, shooters stepped forward and completed their assigned sequences. Some performed well. Others struggled. Every result was recorded on a large scoreboard visible from the observation area. As expected, Ryan Cole quickly moved near the top of the rankings. His first series earned immediate applause from the spectators who had spent the entire morning predicting his success. Ryan accepted the attention comfortably. He smiled, exchanged a few confident remarks with nearby soldiers, and occasionally glanced toward the lower positions on the range. Whenever his eyes found Olivia Hayes, the same amused expression returned. "Not bad," one soldier told him after another strong performance. Ryan nodded. "Just doing what I always do." A few minutes later, another competitor attempted a difficult sequence and missed the scoring standard by a narrow margin. The crowd reacted with sympathetic groans. The wind had become a serious factor now. Even experienced shooters were finding it difficult to judge. Several instructors exchanged approving looks. This was exactly why the evaluation existed. Talent alone was rarely enough. Adaptability mattered. Patience mattered. Judgment mattered. Throughout the morning, names rose and fell on the scoreboard. Some competitors started strong only to struggle later. Others slowly improved. Yet one name remained almost unnoticed. Olivia Hayes. Most spectators paid little attention to her position because she had not yet completed the portion of the evaluation everyone considered the most demanding. Instead, conversations continued revolving around Ryan. By midday, he had become the unofficial favorite. Soldiers gathered around coolers filled with bottled water while discussing his chances of setting a new range record. "Nobody is touching that score," one observer said confidently. "Not today." Another nodded. "Especially not the new transfer." Laughter followed. Ryan happened to overhear the comment and raised his bottle in agreement. "I told you all yesterday. Dinner is safe." The group laughed again. Across the range, Olivia sat alone beneath a small shade structure reviewing weather data posted by the instructors. She appeared completely uninterested in the scoreboard. Instead, she watched the range itself. The distant markers. The shifting flags. The movement of dust across the terrain. Every few minutes she glanced toward the horizon as if studying something invisible to everyone else. Commander Nathan Brooks noticed. He had been observing competitors all morning, but Olivia's behavior stood apart from the rest. While others focused on scores, she focused on conditions. While others reacted emotionally to every result, she remained calm. It was the behavior of someone playing a much longer game. An instructor approached the center of the firing line and announced the next phase of the evaluation. Immediately, conversation stopped. Competitors turned toward the briefing area. Spectators leaned forward. This was the stage everyone had been waiting for. The most difficult targets of the day would now be used. Distances would increase. Conditions would matter more than ever. A ripple of anticipation spread through the crowd. Ryan smiled as he picked up his rifle case. He looked completely confident. Across the range, Olivia stood as well. Her expression remained unchanged. Yet for the first time all day, Commander Nathan Brooks noticed something different. The moment the new targets were announced, Olivia seemed to become even more focused. Not nervous. Not excited. Focused. And somehow that quiet change caught his attention far more than any score on the board. The final phase of the evaluation began shortly after noon. By then, the Nevada heat had transformed the range into a test of patience as much as precision. Waves of hot air drifted above the ground, creating visual distortions that challenged even the most experienced competitors. The distant targets seemed to shimmer against the horizon. Every shooter understood the difficulty. Every instructor knew scores were about to change. One by one, competitors stepped forward to attempt the longest and most demanding shots of the day. Several strong performers from earlier rounds suddenly struggled. Small mistakes became costly. Wind shifts that seemed insignificant near the firing line produced very different effects hundreds of yards away. The crowd that had spent the morning laughing and joking gradually became quieter. The challenge demanded respect. Ryan Cole. The entire range seemed to hold its breath. Olivia Hayes settled behind the rifle and rested her eyes on the distant target. She did not rush. She did not glance toward the scoreboard. She did not acknowledge the dozens of people watching her. The world around her appeared to narrow until only a few things remained important. The wind. The distance. The conditions. Everything else faded into the background. A warm gust crossed the range from left to right. Several flags shifted at slightly different angles. Most spectators never noticed. Olivia did. Her eyes moved from one marker to another. She studied the pattern for several seconds. Then she looked beyond the flags toward the distant terrain itself. Dust drifted across a low ridge nearly halfway to the target. Another detail most people ignored. Commander Nathan Brooks noticed her watching it. His expression remained neutral, but inside he felt a growing certainty. Ryan Cole stood among the spectators with his arms folded. Earlier confidence had given way to curiosity. He expected Olivia to struggle. Yet something about her calm focus felt different from every competitor who had stepped onto the range that day. Around him, conversations had almost completely disappeared. The crowd was waiting. Olivia adjusted her position slightly. Not because she appeared uncertain. Because every movement had a purpose. Her breathing remained steady. Her shoulders relaxed. There was no sign of tension. One instructor standing nearby quietly lowered his clipboard. Another leaned forward for a better view. Even they sensed something unusual. The wind shifted again. Olivia waited. 5 seconds passed. Then 10. Some spectators exchanged confused looks. Others began wondering whether she had lost confidence. Nathan Brooks knew better. She was not waiting because she lacked confidence. She was waiting because she possessed enough confidence to be patient. Suddenly her eyes fixed on the target. The moment had arrived. Her posture changed almost imperceptibly. Every unnecessary movement disappeared. Complete stillness settled over her position. The rifle became an extension of her focus. Seconds later, she completed her attempt. The range officer immediately lifted his binoculars. Another official checked a spotting scope positioned beside the firing line. Neither spoke at first. A strange silence followed. Ryan frowned. The spectators looked from one official to another. Then the first range officer slowly lowered his binoculars. "Center impact," he announced. Several people blinked in surprise. The second official checked again before speaking. "Confirmed." A murmur spread through the crowd. Center impact. At that distance. Under those conditions. The word seemed difficult for many people to process. Ryan stared toward the distant target. One of his friends laughed nervously as if expecting a correction. None came. Instead, another instructor stepped forward and reviewed the data himself. After several moments, he nodded. Confirmed again. The murmurs grew louder. Soldiers who had spent the entire week making jokes suddenly looked uncertain. Spectators who had barely noticed Olivia that morning were now staring at her. Yet Olivia herself showed almost no reaction. She stood, secured her equipment, and stepped away from the firing position with the same calm demeanor she had displayed since arriving at Falcon Ridge. The scorekeepers updated the board. As the numbers changed, conversations stopped once more. For the first time all day, Olivia Hayes stood at the top. And across the range, Commander Nathan Brooks allowed himself the smallest hint of a smile because he knew the scoreboard was only the beginning of what Falcon Ridge was about to learn. For several long seconds, nobody seemed to know what to say. The scoreboard stood in plain view of everyone at Falcon Ridge, yet many continued staring at it as if the numbers might suddenly change. They did not. Olivia Hayes remained at the top. The same woman who had spent her first days on base being ignored, questioned, and quietly mocked had just delivered the strongest performance of the evaluation. Small conversations broke out across the observation area. At first they were cautious. Then they grew louder. Soldiers compared notes. Instructors reviewed data. Spectators who had barely paid attention to Olivia earlier now spoke about little else. Ryan Cole remained unusually quiet. He looked toward the scoreboard, then toward Olivia, then back toward the scoreboard again. Nothing about the result matched the expectations he had carried into the day. One of his friends attempted a laugh. Maybe she got lucky. The explanation sounded weak even before the sentence ended. Another soldier shook his head. Nobody gets lucky under those conditions. Nearby instructors appeared equally impressed. Several of them gathered around the official scoring sheets. One pointed toward Olivia's final numbers. Another nodded slowly. Their expressions carried the same message. What had happened was real. Commander Nathan Brooks finally stepped away from the observation area and walked toward the center of the range. His appearance immediately drew attention. Conversations quieted as soldiers noticed him approaching. Nathan stopped near the scoreboard and looked across the assembled crowd. There is something many of you do not know, he said calmly. The range became completely silent. Even the wind seemed quieter. Nathan glanced toward Olivia, who stood beside her equipment with the same composed expression she had worn all day. Most of you assumed Olivia Hayes arrived here as a new transfer with limited experience. Several soldiers exchanged uncomfortable looks. Nathan continued. That assumption was incorrect. The silence deepened. Ryan felt his stomach tighten. He suddenly remembered every joke, every comment, every dismissive remark he had made since Olivia arrived. Nathan folded his hands behind his back. Before coming to Falcon Ridge, Olivia served as a senior long-range marksmanship instructor at one of the most respected advanced training programs in the country. A ripple moved through the crowd. Nathan was not finished. She spent years evaluating shooters, developing training standards, and mentoring some of the most successful marksmen currently serving. More silence followed. The information seemed difficult for many people to process. The quiet woman they had dismissed was not inexperienced. She was the person who had taught people like them. Nathan looked around the range. The reason she came here was not to prove anything. She came here to help improve this program. Nobody laughed now. Nobody smirked. Several soldiers lowered their eyes. Ryan stood frozen. The confidence that had carried him throughout the morning had disappeared completely. Yet the most remarkable part of the moment was Olivia herself. She showed no sign of satisfaction. No triumph. No desire to embarrass anyone. She simply listened. When Nathan finished speaking, she gave a small nod and began packing her equipment. The crowd watched in silence. For the first time since she arrived at Falcon Ridge, people were no longer seeing what they expected to see. They were seeing who Olivia Hayes truly was. And that realization carried far more weight than any score on the board. The crowd slowly began to disperse, but the atmosphere across Falcon Ridge had changed completely. Conversations that had once been filled with jokes now carried a different tone. Soldiers spoke quietly. Instructors reviewed notes. Many of the people who had dismissed Olivia Hayes only days earlier found themselves replaying every interaction they had shared with her. Ryan Cole remained standing near the scoreboard long after most competitors had left. The numbers were still there. The result was still real. Eventually, he spotted Olivia carrying her equipment case toward the parking area. For a moment he considered turning away. That would have been easier. Instead, he took a breath and walked toward her. Several nearby soldiers noticed and watched from a distance. Ryan stopped a few feet away. Olivia looked up. "Can I help you?" she asked calmly. Ryan glanced down before meeting her eyes. "I owe you an apology." The words seemed difficult for him to say, but he said them anyway. "Actually, I owe you several." Olivia waited without interrupting. "I made assumptions," Ryan continued. "I thought I knew who you were before I ever spoke to you. I thought confidence was the same thing as skill." A faint smile crossed Olivia's face. Not a victorious smile. Not a mocking smile. Simply understanding. Ryan shook his head. "I spent days talking when I should have been paying attention." For a moment neither spoke. Then Olivia looked toward the range stretching across the desert behind them. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the training grounds. "The rifle does not care who is holding it," she said quietly. "It only responds to preparation, discipline, and patience." Ryan nodded slowly. Those words carried more weight than any lecture could have. "I understand that now." Olivia extended her hand. Ryan shook it. The tension disappeared immediately. Nearby soldiers who had expected embarrassment or confrontation saw something entirely different. They saw professionalism. Respect. Growth. Later that evening, Commander Nathan Brooks stood outside headquarters watching the sunset spread across the Nevada horizon. Falcon Ridge looked peaceful beneath the fading light. Olivia approached carrying a folder of training notes. Nathan smiled. "Quite a day." "It was productive," Olivia replied. Nathan laughed softly. "That is one way to describe it." He looked toward the distant range. "You could have told them who you were on the first day." Olivia considered the thought. Would it have mattered? Nathan smiled again because he already knew the answer. No introduction could have taught the lesson as effectively as experience had. Reputation might earn attention. Performance earned respect. As darkness settled over Falcon Ridge, the stories from the evaluation spread throughout the base. Yet the story people remembered most was not about a score. It was not about a ranking. It was about a quiet woman who never argued, never boasted, and never tried to prove anyone wrong. She simply did her job. And in doing so, she reminded everyone of something easy to forget. The strongest people rarely need to announce their strength. They let their actions speak for them. At Falcon Ridge, that lesson would be remembered for a very long time.